this is one of the points that I think a lot of people look at of if the serpent is being crafty, or how far do we want to read this, if they're being crafty, if they're being deceptive, if they're being a trickster. This is kind of that first opening of the door, I think, for a lot of people of, well, why does this need to be something maybe other than just a regular animal or other than God, that we need to get some distance here in this moment of, are we seeing a scene of temptation or testing? Because if we're in the garden and we're in this divine place, are we comfortable with the idea that, does God know that the serpent is here? And if the serpent is Satan, there's some people that say, like, God didn't know that the serpent was Satan, that Satan was in the garden, which is a whole other problem.
Correct. And we've talked about this with the insertion of the word angel of the Lord versus the Lord doing something, putting distance between God and things that are problematic. If you don't have what is essentially a talking snake doing this tempting or testing or whatever we want to call it, doing this conversation, if there's no serpent doing this, then you've basically just got Adam and Eve walking around going straight for the fruit of this tree. Ultimately, they're going to say, why is it that we can't do this? And they're just using their free will, which God apparently gave them. And it's just God and Adam and Eve, right? And then a bunch of nameless animals.
Yeah.
So this tends to make it look like God, he's the only other player, right? So God may be responsible for tempting or testing, and maybe they're not prepared for that. So they have this talking snake that come up, which is an odd animal to begin with. It doesn't have any arms, doesn't have any legs, right? So we're going to get the etiology for where that came from in a minute. But you have this fourth party come into play that now can become, it's just a snake, but it can now be responsible for why Adam and Eve are doing what they're doing. It's their free will, but it's not, there's a buffer in between God and Adam and Eve now. It's this snake, this talking snake, this clever snake.
There's two other stories with this discomfort with God testing that we need to put on the table here as well. One of them may be more well-known than the other. The first is the binding of Isaac in Genesis 22, where we get the verse that tells us, after these things, God tested Abraham. And
but is that what it says? Is that what it says?
Exactly. We get because we have test. How may we need to be understanding this? We're uncomfortable because God is making a trial of Abraham, or we're getting closer to the serpent territory of what exactly is going on between these two.
How do we translate the word nisa, right? How do you translate this word? Certainly God is testing Abraham. That is an accurate translation. God is testing Abraham. Hey, Abraham, you know that son you've been waiting for all this time? Go sacrifice him on this mountain that I'm going to show you. I want you to kill your own son for me.
Yep. Let's make a deal.
Yeah, I'm going to, here's what I need you to do. That is, by any other means, we would use this word to say he's tempting him. But we have this rule that God doesn't tempt people.
God doesn't tempt people.
So we got to call it something else. Just like the Ark of the Covenant can't be an idol.
No.
Right? Because we don't allow idolatry, even though it's a wooden box covered in gold with mythological hybrid beings on top. Just like we're a monotheistic religion, even though we've got all these other, non-human divine beings, sons of God and angels and stuff, but we're a monotheistic religion.
Yep.
So we got to call them something else. We've got to say that God's doing something else. So we can't tempt because that's bad. So we'll say he tested.
The second example, because this one we move past, and you're like, yeah, it's a test. It's fine. It's no big deal. Let's jump to 1 Kings 22 for a second quick comparison with the story of Ahab. And God, the Lord says, who will entice, speaking to the divine council, who will entice Ahab so that he may go up and fall? And then a little bit later down, the Lord said, a spirit says to God, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets. And then the Lord said, you are to entice him and you shall succeed. Go out and do it. So you see, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. So again, now we've got a little bit of a buffer. There's a lying spirit that's coming, but it's being sent from God. God's saying, hey, who wants to do me a favor and go down and get Ahab to do this? Somebody raises their hand and God goes, perfect. Go and get him to do this thing. And so if we're looking at the serpent scene here, I think if you put these two next to each other, is the serpent acting because the serpent wants to, or did we get a couple verses that dropped out where God's saying, hey, who wants to go sit in the tree? We don't have that. That's not there. But in 1 Kings 22, we've got this divine council scene where somebody's being sent to entice Ahab to do something. It's
to deceive, right?
Right.
It's to deceive is the word in Ezekiel 14:9. You have it in 1 Kings 22. It's this idea of God deliberately trying to deceive.
Yes.
And people will say theologically, they'll offer an apology. Oh, but these are bad guys. We need to okay.
It's Ahab, so we're okay with it.
Correct. Since he's a bad guy, it's okay, right? The end justifies the means. You've still got God deliberately, let's say, looking for someone to deceive him on his behalf. But look at verse 23. So you see, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all your prophets.
Yeah.
God is hardening Pharaoh's heart, but we don't like Pharaoh, so it's okay. It's fair. Again, it's God doing things that it's like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. And if anyone else did that, we'd say that's tempting or that's deceiving but it's God doing it. Now, for me, if you've ever had a class with me, God does what he wants. God is God. He gets to do whatever he wants. That's what he gets to do. But people who think that God must abide by certain rules and he can't act this way and he can't do this, they put God in this box and he can't act this way, and they ignore Isaiah 45, right? And God has to act a certain way. He can't be the singular God who's responsible for everything. He can only do good things and he can't do these other things. They don't like this verse, and so they've got to offer apologies around it.